Welcome to Rges, Algebra 1, Lesson 15A. This is a review of Chapter 6. This is 612. We will be skipping over 1 through 5. That has to do with those axioms of arithmetic and algebra, which we have somewhat exposed you to, but I'm not requiring you to know those. I'm looking for terms that we have not already reviewed. Please do read over the questions, making sure that you understand them. But again, 1 through 5 I will not test you on, but you should have a working familiarity with these. Okay, now it does ask you in number 1, name the 3 major things one does in algebra. The 3 major things you can do is write an expression. Let's say 2 more than 3 times a number. That would be 3 times a number and 2 more, something like that. You can evaluate the expression or find the value of the expression if you're given, if you're given the value of x. Evaluate the expression. In other words, we think of this as substitution. In other words, I would say evaluate the above expression if x equals 5, for instance. And so you would plug in the 5 every time you see the x, and then you would solve the whole expression. The third thing you can do is you could evaluate or find the value, I guess is the better way to put that. Find the value up above in 2. You're also finding the value. You're finding the value of the expression when you know what x is, or you can find the value of x when you know what the expression equals. And we would call that also solving the equation. If I know that the whole expression above equals a certain thing, then I could solve for x and figure out what x equals. So that's why we equate it with solving the equation. Okay. Now, looking at some more terms here. We're looking at number 3 in 6.12. I've already just discussed the difference between an equation and an expression. An equation will have the equal sign, a real number and an integer. We've done a lot with real numbers. I think you understand that. They can be both rational and irrational, whereas an integer would be a whole number, either positive or negative or 0. A term and a factor, the difference, terms are added or subtracted together, factors are multiplied together. Trinomial expression would be an expression that has 3 terms, whereas a cubic expression would be an expression that has a variable to the 3rd power in it as its highest value of a term, okay? The coefficient and an exponent, let's say I said negative 7x to the 5th. The coefficient or numerical coefficient would be negative 7, and the exponent would be the 5. Or you can go review those properties or axioms if you want, but again, I'm not interested in you having more than a familiarity with those right now. So your problems will begin at number 6. This is a cumulative review going all the way back to Chapter 1, so I think that you will find much of it very familiar to you. If you glance at number 8 real quickly, this is an overview of the things you've learned to do. You've learned to distribute. Let's say if I have 2x times 3x squared minus 1, you've learned to distribute the value over a polynomial. You've learned to multiply polynomials. You've learned to factor a trinomial. You've learned to factor the difference of squares. And you've learned to simplify, such as J, where you would do a couple different distributions and gather like terms. Let's recall something like this. When we are asked to take a trinomial or any kind of polynomial and divide by a monomial, whether it has a variable in it or not, we would view this as three terms, 1, 2, or 3, viewing it as this, 15 minus 15x over 3 plus 21 over 3, simplifying through all three of these. 3 goes into 9, 3x squared, 3 goes into 15, 3 goes into 21. So that would be a perfectly legitimate way to do that for a monomial. Sorry, I'm trying to erase that little mess there. And the second way I could view that is to simply go up to the numerator above and instead divide by a common factor. 3 goes into each of those. No variable goes into each of them, leaving me with 3x squared minus 3 goes into 15.5x plus 3 goes into 21.7. And notice what happens. I will cancel. Okay. Either way is a perfectly legitimate way to find the answer for that. You know how to complete the squares. We're asking to do evaluation and solving problems, solving equations. Recall absolute value. That's a big idea. So make sure you go back and review absolute value. Recall that absolute value is distance from the 0 on the number line. So really, if I had the absolute value of x, I would have two values, one to the right on the number line and the other to the left on the number line. Another way to see that, it would be to say if the absolute value of -7 would be 7, the absolute value of +7 would be 7. So I'm going to have two values. Very important idea. We can review that more in class if you need it. Looking a little bit more, the things that have been more recent, we have done a lot of review on already. So I would say that this would be the biggest one to go back to and practice a few problems before you do this cumulative review.